On a quiet Sunday morning in August 1971, police cars moved through the streets of Palo Alto, California. Officers knocked on doors, read young men their rights, handcuffed them on their front lawns, and drove them away. Sirens on, neighbors watching. None of these men had committed a crime. 9 days earlier, each of them had answered a newspaper ad. $15 a day, it said, for a psychological study of prison life. Within 36 hours, one of them would be screaming to be let out. Within 6 days, the study would be shut down in a hurry, and the man who ran it would spend the next 50 years explaining what happened in that basement. This is the story of the Stanford Prison Experiment, and the strangest part isn't how it ended. It's what we found out about it decades later. The summer of 1971, a psychology professor named Philip Zimbardo takes over the basement of Stanford Psychology Building and turns it into a jail. Real steel bar doors on 3 tiny cells. A closet 2 feet wide, labeled The Hole. Cameras and intercoms hidden in the walls. 75 students apply to the ad. Zimbardo's team interviews them and keeps 24, deliberately choosing the most stable, the most healthy, the most normal young men in the pool. No criminal records, no psychological issues. The point was precisely that these were ordinary people. Then, with a series of coin flips, the group is split in half. Guards and prisoners. Think about that for a second. The only difference between the two groups was luck. The guards get khaki uniforms, wooden batons, and mirrored sunglasses. An idea Zimbardo borrowed from a prison movie, so no one could read their eyes. They're told one thing above all: maintain order. No physical violence allowed. Everything else, their call. The prisoners get smocks with ID numbers, stocking caps, and a chain around one ankle. From this moment on, nobody uses their names. Prisoner 8612. Prisoner 416. The identity swap is the entire experiment. Zimbardo expected 2 boring weeks. He worried he wouldn't get any usable data at all. The first day passes almost politely. The trouble starts on day 2. The prisoners barricade themselves inside their cells with their beds. The guards respond by blasting a fire extinguisher through the bars, stripping the ringleaders, and throwing them into the hole. Then they invent something more effective than force: a privileged cell. Good prisoners get their beds back. Troublemakers sleep on concrete. Divide and rule. Rediscovered from scratch, overnight by college students. The night shift becomes the dark heart of the study. Whistles at 2:30 in the morning. Counts that last for hours. Push-ups with a guard's foot on a prisoner's back. One guard in particular. The prisoners nickname him John Wayne. Puts on a southern accent and gets more inventive with every shift, forcing prisoners into degrading games while the cameras roll. Nobody tells him to stop. Not the other guards. Not the researchers watching through the cameras. Nobody. 36 hours in, prisoner 8612, a student named Doug Corpy, begins to lose it. He screams that he's burning up inside, that he can't take another night, that he wants out. Here's the detail people forget. At first, the team doesn't quite believe him. A psychological study, and the psychologist's first instinct is that he's faking. They release him. Over the next days, more follow, breakdowns, crying, a hunger strike. One prisoner is force-fed, and when he refuses to eat, the guards turn the other prisoners against him. Give up your blanket, or he stays in the hole all night. By day 5, Zimbardo himself has stopped acting like a scientist. He's the prison superintendent now, worrying about security, about rumors of an escape plot. When a colleague asks him what the independent variable of his study is, he gets angry at the interruption. The prison had swallowed the researcher too. The person who ends it is a recent PhD named Christina Maslach. She comes down to the basement on the evening of day 5, watches guards march chained prisoners to the toilet with bags over their heads, and refuses to pretend it's science. "It's terrible what you're doing to these boys," she tells Zimbardo. They fight about it. It said she was one of over 50 outsiders who saw the prison that week, and the only one who objected. The next morning, August 20th, 1971, the Stanford Prison Experiment shuts down. 6 days into a planned 14, the story explodes. Congress hears testimony. Textbooks canonize it. For 50 years, it stands as psychology's darkest parable. Give ordinary people power and a uniform, and cruelty just emerges. When American soldiers tortured prisoners at Abu Ghraib in 2004, Zimbardo testified for the defense. The situation did it, not the men. Case closed. Except, in 2018, a writer named Ben Blum published recording from the Stanford archives, tapes most people never knew existed. And on those tapes, the story changes. There's the warden, a researcher, privately coaching a reluctant guard, telling him the experiment needs him to be tougher, that they want the prisoners to feel powerless. So much for cruelty emerging on its own. It was requested. John Wayne, the most sadistic guard, explained that he treated the whole thing as an acting exercise, pushing to see when someone would stop him. Doug Corpy, the first breakdown, he now says he was performing. He wanted out to study for an exam, and screaming was the only exit. And when researchers later tried to replicate the study under controlled conditions, the cruelty didn't replicate. So is it all fake? No. And this is the part worth sitting with. The suffering was real. The sleep deprivation was real. Zimbardo maintained until his death in 2024 that the conclusions stand. But the tapes reveal something the legend hides. The guards weren't transformed by power. Most of them were doing what an authority figure asked them to do, in a role they didn't want to disappoint. Which leaves us with two possible readings. And honestly, the second one is scarier. Reading 1, the famous one. There's a monster in all of us, waiting for a uniform. Reading 2, the one on the tapes. There's no monster. There's just a deep, quiet instinct to play the role we've been handed, to not make it weird, to not disappoint the person in charge. No transformation required, just compliance, one small step at a time. 50 outside observers walked through that basement. 49 played their role too, and maybe that's the real reason this story conquered every textbook for half a century. A story that flatters us. It was the situation, not the people, is a story nobody double-checks. We believed it because it was useful and comfortable and too good to check. That's not a 1971 problem. That's a firmware problem. It ships with all of us. If this kind of story is your kind of story, the ones where the human mind is the crime scene, there's a new one here every week. I'll see you in the next one.